Did everybody hear that? Should I paraphrase it? The speaker, I'm sorry, I don't know you. Jan from the Nelson Atkins Museum said that she was encouraged to hear a discussion about art history, that a lot of the contemporary installations she had seen recently were more about sort of familiarizing people with contemporary art as opposed to offering a different kind of historical framework through which to look at the material.
You know, it's interesting. Part of it has to do with the privilege of having an encyclopedic context. You know, I showed you this boy from South Tel Aviv made of styrofoam and black paper. Honestly, our teachers in the education wing do talk to kids about Michelangelo's David. They're not trying to explain why that tall guy is contemporary art. They're trying to explain how he connects to a tradition. Or we recently acquired, you might have seen it in the newspaper because it was big news, a 1997 Gerhard Richter abstract painting. Spectacular work. And it's installed very near that Focus exhibition on Rubens' Death of Adonis, which I showed briefly. And you know, our teachers don't stand in front of it and talk about what makes it art. They stand in front of it and they talk about how, separated by several hundred years, two artists using the same palette built up a narrative from the canvas to the surface. And that's the way in. So it's not that one is alien and one is understood, it's that there's process, there's creative process, and it applies regardless of the time frame in which it was created. Might have had a different message, it might have had a different political imperative that stimulated a little bit of what it's about, but you can talk about that, and you can appreciate that, but you can also understand that they're each the same. They just happen in the aesthetic and the vocabulary of a different time in history.
Did people hear that? Oh, good. Because that was going to be hard to reconstruct. But do you find, John, I mean, just to continue perhaps being a little polemical, that part of the difficulty in sometimes the cross-departmental collaborations that might happen between modern and contemporary, say, and other departments in a general or encyclopedic museum are in part because the sort of the new art history, which is no longer new, it's now 50 years old, has been so slowly embraced in certain sectors of the museum, and is so much the kind of, you know, the gospel of the modern and contemporary folks, and that there's architecture, but that there's also a kind of rhetorical or philosophical split in the ranks as well. I do too. Yeah.
John, I just want to say two things. One thing to you, and I have a question for Helen. One, revolutionize with discipline. That's what you have to do. You just have to get together and revolutionize with discipline so that the result isn't simplistic. But Helen, let's talk from the contemporary venue's point of view.
Sure.
Because you're a great example. I mean, I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but one can slog through it if you are in a universal or an encyclopedic setting with a strong and modern contemporary cab. But what do you do in a fully contemporary setting where you want to draw back on that reservoir of history and bring it into what you do?
Well, I think in the I mean, for me, LA MoCA, despite its current state of, I don't know, what's this diplomatic word? Disrepair.
Disarray.
Dismay.
Challenge. We use the word
There
challenge.
you go. That's the good bureaucratic word. Despite its current challenges, LA MoCA for me has been a kind of lodestar in terms of thinking about how to narrate what is historical about the present, and how messy that is because it contains the ethical problem of telling the history of people who are alive. And that's a very different that has a different charge to it than telling the history of people who you never have to see in the street or in a bar. You know, you're not beholden to them in an intersubjective way in the same manner. I think, you know, one of the reasons the ICA in its newest iteration decided to collect was in part because I think it realized the Groundhog Day effect of always having to explain the new was fatiguing. And then most recently, it's made a decision not to collect only what it shows, but just to collect, to become a collecting institution per se, in part so that we could point to other formations. But I think that there's also a way in which exhibitions are organized that can take on some of that historicizing or contextualizing impulse. And I feel that I feel like one of the dominant sort of affects and modes of working in contemporary is this is new and this is cool and we want to show it to you. And it's like the Seinfeld moment, like not that there's anything wrong with that, but I feel like its long-term effects are actually debilitating toward creating a larger sense of cultural literacy around the ideas of the present, where they come from, how they emerge, and what you might need to do as an audience member to intelligently confront and assimilate the new. Okay, one question and then we're going to stop. Piranha. Could you go to the microphone? No one can hear you. And I'm afraid I won't be able to reconstruct it. Thank you. Give a sister a chance.
Hello.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Thanks in the booth.
I was saying yesterday we were invited to the Peabody Essex Museum, and we saw a beautiful example of what you're discussing, the Michael Lind show that Trevor Smith has just put up there. And I'm sure many of you saw it. And so I just wanted to say that it's happening, and that last night we saw this amazing example of just that, using an artist entering into a collection, looking at a historical object, making new work, and totally entering into the museum, the floor, the walls. It was just fantastic.
I agree with you, and it is happening, although I would argue that it happens more consistently on the part of artists than it does on the part of contemporary curators. Like, I feel like artists are doing that work in a really profound way, and perhaps we have not been carrying our share of the water.
I want to add to that, actually. If, as we do and you do, you engage with artists to do collaborative projects in our setting, the light goes on immediately, and they see this accumulation of 1 million+ years of history, and that's what they want to respond to. It's sort of the perfect storm, because they intersect with all of that, and you're getting contemporary creativity